I read that the average self-published author only sells 100 books. And I thought, well, how's that going to work? And then on the other flip side, that half of the debut authors published by the Big Five will earn less than $10,000 in their first year. That includes their advance. And that this is after waiting years and years for a publication. And then I sat down with a friend of mine who's a fairly well-known television writer, and I told her I was thinking about going the independent route, and literally she dropped her fork on the table and she said, "Don't do it." And I thought, wow, I've known this woman for a long time. She's like, I did it and it didn't work. And I'm thinking, this is a woman who's written more television than all of us have watched, and she certainly knows her way around writing. She said, I put my book up on Amazon and no one bought it. I sold like 30 copies, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I thinking? So I did delve through further with her. Turned out she wrote her book under a pseudonym because she didn't want people to know that in all this reality television she was producing that she'd written a romance. So she couldn't ever really get behind her book. She was writing under a pen name and wanted it to be secret. Her entire marketing consisted of her asking another writer friend who has a big 600 or 700 friends on Facebook to promote it in a couple of posts. That was her entire marketing.
Wow.
And so I said to her, look, that's great. I'm going to do it differently. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew I was going to go a different way. And because my whole skill set really comes from the film and television, and before that I was in the broadcast industry and in television and radio. And in that thinking, it was, if I'm going to do this, it's going to be a business. And it's going to be like a production. I have to think about it as though I really am in production, with budgets, with time schedules, with making choices not based on what my gut would like to have happen or the writer side of me hopes happen, but like really calculated decisions about releasing this book. So the book itself would be what you would call production, but essentially we were then in post-production, which is the longest period in the production of a film. I mean, it can take weeks or months, sometimes years in post-production. So I hired an editor and then worked with a copy editor. My friend Kess is the beneficiary of many emails from me during the copy editing phase, where I would release my anger and frustration by writing poetry about the copy editing process.
That's a damn good poet.
Exactly. I started working with an interior formatter, thinking about what does the book look like inside and how does that register with readers. And then simultaneously thinking about the marketing. I had read that the book cover, you get 3 seconds for people to decide if they like your book or not. And I thought, that's probably true, and I actually tried to see if that was true anecdotally. I'd go into the bookstore and look and realize, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm looking through those shelves or I'm looking through those tables, and if the cover doesn't grab me or looks strange, I absolutely don't even bother to pick up the book. But even more important, I started to see what was considered self-pub books, and within seconds I could tell which ones were self-published. And I couldn't tell you exactly what that was. I don't have a list of, well, it's self-published if the following things. But you could almost instantly tell that when it was put along other side of other books. And I thought, I don't want that. I don't want it to look like inherently self-published. I was very lucky then in a process that I didn't know would work, but ended up working profoundly for me, is that I went through Barnes & Noble a couple of times with my 9-year-old daughter. She was 8 at the time. At that age, if you remember, they're all attached to your hip and they want to do everything with you. And I wanted to make this something we could do together. And so we would go through Barnes & Noble and take pictures of the covers in this genre that we liked. And we eventually made it a big file and sort of culled that down to 10 of our favorite covers. And the #1 cover I saw was done by St. Martin's Press, and I saw the book cover's name, book designer's name on the inside the book. So I reached out to her, and with my good fortune, she turned out to be freelancing at that point and was no longer working for St. Martin's Press. She was freelancing because she was tired of working on books that other people told her to work on, and so the first thing she said is, I'm going to read your book and I'll decide if I'm going to do your cover. And so then I thought, well, how long is that going to take? Well, luckily she lives in New York and takes the train a lot, gets to read a lot. And so I ended up getting a yes from her, and we worked for many months to hone what the cover ended up being. Developed a website then, and then really decided that my focus was going to be entirely on social media. Now, everyone tells you in social media, oh my gosh, you're going to have tens of thousands of followers, and you better get cracking now. If you expect to release that book, you got to have all those people waiting for it. And I really couldn't figure out how you get tens of thousands of followers when your book is not out there, when no one's ever heard of you. And you could attract people for the wrong reasons, but I just kind of ignored that and said, I'll put my social media up on my terms and with my messaging. People like it, great. If they don't, it's not really going to bother me. I'll figure it out. What I ended up doing was focusing a large part of my messaging on not about buy my book, but on a message that was very clear to me, like why I wrote the book. And that was about looking for good. So in the pre-release, I started posting stories about real life people who were doing good things. I called them real life good Sams, and my criteria was there are people doing extraordinary good for other people, sometimes a great personal sacrifice, but always without expectation of notoriety. And when I started posting them, then I started hearing from other people, and people started responding about it, and they said, have you heard about this story and that story? And all of a sudden I was getting emails, the book wasn't even out, emails and posts about real life good Sams. And I thought, well, if you go looking for good, you're gonna find it. It's gonna come into your life in a profound way. And even more powerful, good's gonna come looking for you. And that's what happened to me in those early weeks and months before the book was even out, while I was struggling with a copy editor and the book cover. All of these stories of real life good Sam started coming out. That trailer that I mentioned to you, long forgotten, not out there yet, wasn't any buzz about the book in a way, but it was all about this real life good Sams. And I heard about this one woman. It literally gave me chills when I heard her story. Her name is Kathy O'Grady, and she lives in Boston, and her best friend's husband died of cancer after struggling with it for 318 days. And as a tribute to him, anonymously, she went around Boston doing acts of kindness, 318 acts of kindness. And they ranged from leaving blankets for the homeless to baking cookies for people in the waiting room of the hospital to making care kits for nurses and doctors. She did all of these things anonymously until a friend outed her. And then once her friend outed her identity, then she was covered all over the Huffington Post and everywhere. Just in a way, like the story of Good Sam, this person doing these great deeds. I reached out to her, and it's the bizarrest relationship because I felt like I'd known her my whole life. And I said, Kathy, you're a real life Good Sam. You must read this book. She immediately loved the book, started blabbing about it on her social media, which is massive because she owns a jewelry store, as well as does a lot of things in the philanthropy world for breast cancer and for a number of other causes. And then we kept up our communication, and then I heard about another man in Provo, Utah. His name is Daniel Smith. And he had been laid off from his job. He had a wife and 2 kids to support, and at Christmas time, he was terminated. And instead of wallowing and watching daytime TV and drinking Starbucks, which is probably what I would have done, he devoted the next 30 days of his life to 30 days of acts of kindness. And he used his savings to go and buy care kits for the homeless. He took and paid for the groceries of an elderly woman at the grocery store. He gave a very large tip to a waitress who was a working mom. And he actually stood in a Walmart parking lot. People thought he was crazy, but then they liked him when he was handing out gift cards to people in the Walmart parking lot. And he would kind of try to identify these families that had very big families and probably not a lot of means. And these stories really touched me, and I reached out to him too, told him I thought he was a good Sam. And then I invited these two to come to my book launch in Los Angeles. And the thing about that, for me, was not about marketing the book. It really did come from a pure sense of wanting to meet these people who were devoting their lives to being good and doing extraordinary good for people they didn't know. And then they came here, and even as they came here, then I found that what they did inspired other people to do good. Daniel and his wife could not afford to stay in Los Angeles, but I found a good Sam who was willing to put them up. And then I wanted to honor them with some money so they could continue their Good Sam works. And it was so easy to ask a few friends, hey, this is what these people have done. Can we let them leave Los Angeles with some money so they can continue their Good Sam works? That really started a whole trend. I started seeing on Facebook that because of what these guys were posting and what this messaging was, people were writing checks to the Ronald McDonald House and writing Good Sam in the memo and posting pictures of that. And I thought, if the book's not even out, but if that's what it makes people do, I don't care if I only sell 100 copies. That's amazing. I got another photograph where somebody gave a very large tip to a waitress and they wrote Good Sam on it. And I started getting more and more of those kinds of things, and the book was not even out. It did bring them to Los Angeles. They came to a book launch, which for me was a really beautiful moment. And I cried when those people left. I felt like they were a very important part of me and who I was becoming and what the book was changing me into thinking about. So what happened after that? The book had a steady sales, nothing spectacular. Thankfully, I passed the 100 book mark after the first week, so I could feel confident, okay, I'm gonna sell more than the 100 that they say the average person does. But I wouldn't say it was spectacular in the month of June, which is when it was released, or really that much in July. There was a lot of buzz about it. Very positive buzz, and I started seeing people reviewing it, and very positive, mostly 5-star, some 4-star reviews on Amazon, good stuff being said on Goodreads, and the places that you really care. I had a great review from Kirkus Reviews, a review that you can pay for. I was terrified to spend that kind of money and find out if it was bad or good, but it turned out to be good. So I was very happy with that. But it wasn't fantastic, and I think what's really powerful about that is that you can't know in the beginning. You can't know. You can have some hints of it, but as Darlene Quinn likes to say, it's a marathon. It is not a sprint. And for me, that turned out to be very true. By mid-August, just a month ago, I woke up and looked on my KDP account and said, something's wrong here. What's going on? I'm suddenly selling like triple, quadruple the number of books each day than I ever had. What's going on? Nothing had changed in my messaging. I didn't have any kind of big blog posts that were going on at that time. And quite frankly, all of the celebrities that I know in my life, George Lopez had tweeted about it, and Judge Reinhold had, and Ron Glass had, and some friends of mine that are not very, ginormous names, those never really did, give me the spike in sales that I was suddenly seeing sort of out of the blue. I started trying to figure out where it was coming from and started seeing that it was appearing on a lot of Christian blogs and posts. And I didn't understand that. But then I'm a Jewish girl from Chicago, so my first thought was, well, how is it being found by Christians? I'm not marketing to them. What are they finding in this? And a very good friend said, well, if you're going to name your book after a phrase that Jesus says, you're going to have Christians curious about it. I was like, oh, got it. And another good friend of mine, he is one of the producers of The Passion of the Christ. At that point, the book literally was climbing the charts, outselling Bill O'Reilly's Killing Jesus on Amazon, which our friends at Ridley Scott's company were making into a movie, and they couldn't believe it. They're like, how's your book selling out Bill O'Reilly? And then it was even outselling The Shack, which is the big book in that genre. And a friend of mine who's that producer of The Passion of the Christ said, how are you Christian fiction? And I said, I'm not Christian fiction. The book is clearly found an audience.